call this meeting to order, and I will lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time when we can work together on the city's business, preparing for next year's budget. Just pray you give us wisdom, give us understanding, and just thank you for the many blessings that we have in this country, for the freedom that we have. Thank you for this time again, and help us as we move forward. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay. It's kind of different sitting down here, but we'll roll with it. Item C, we'd like to seek approval of the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Naomi's made the motion. Brent seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hopefully Chris will be here soon. You guys will get tired of doing all that. Citizen comments. I know there's a big crowd here this afternoon, but it doesn't look like anyone's willing to speak, so we'll move on. Ex parte. Just want to check, make sure there's no one that has any conflicts that they'd like to declare or communication that might influence their ability to consider today's agenda items impartially. I'm okay, I think, today. I don't think playing golf qualifies as a conflict, so I don't know what you were saying, Brent. Just have to let that go. So, okay. You guys are okay too? With this will be here. Okay, moving on. Proclamations. I'm not quite ready to do this yet, but I just want to mention this. I'm going to make a proclamation for next month, the Goddard Go Band Fundraiser Month. And I'm looking for 100 people to make donations in 5 different categories. 20 people to do 400, 20 people to do 300, 20 people to do 200, 20 people to do 100, and 20 people to do 50. If we do that, if that numbers came out exactly right, we raised $21,000 to pay the down payment. And I would like to say we really only need 199 because today I've written a check for $400 to start the proceedings. I've also have a pledge for $50 for somebody. And then the other thing is we have pennies for progress. I've had somebody at the senior center give me some pennies because my wife made a comment about me looking at old pennies. And like you said, we found one that's worth $1.13. So we'll take checks, we'll take cash, and don't worry, staff, if they bring pennies in, I'll convert it so you guys don't have to count them. But I'd like to see if we could raise $21,000 in the next 30 days to cover the expense for the bank. And I think with 100 people in this community, the people that care, we can do this. And we only need 98 more people to step in. That's what we'll maybe officially proclaim at the next meeting, but I kind of want to get that kick started. Somehow that's going to end up in the Goddard Senior Center newsletter here at the end of the month.
Pledge 200.
That's
Do you
great.
have one for 200?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have pledge 200. I can't write the check right now.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine. All I'm saying is, go Goddard. Go Goddard.
That's 200 too then.
There you go. See? Kicked it off.
All right, kicking it off.
Cash.
Start getting somebody that's trustworthy.
Right here.
What happened to all that cash in our collective? Well, it looks like he's driving a new vehicle. Better not be
I'll
buying a
bring
new
you a
car
check
next
tomorrow.
time. Yeah, these pennies really added up. Okay. Without further ado, let's move along here to the consent agenda. We've got the sound waiver for summer ball and also for sound waiver for the street closure for Genesis for their Genesis run. I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Naomi seconds. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries 3-0. We're rolling on. Unfinished business, none. New business, aye. Stand. And on-call personnel policy, Sarah.
Ms. Humble?
All right, Honorable Mayor and City Council, this is a proposal for a change to our standby and on-call personnel policy. City staff has identified the need to modernize and clarify the standby and on-call policy. We have done expressive research gathered from Derby, Hayesville, Park City, Valley Center, and Mays. The benefits of changing this policy: it would make our policy align with industry standards, provides clear expectations for employees, promote fairness in scheduling and compensation, and formalize after-hours responsibilities and response requirements. So the proposal is for every hour that a person on call works or is on call, they would get an hour for that standby pay. We would have one person in Public Works, one person in wastewater, so there would always be 2 people on call at a time. If they are on a call out or on the regular hours, they would claim the call out rate or their regular hour rate. So it'd just be the hours that they're not actually back here in town responding to a call or their regular 8-hour shift. Anytime they are called out for a response, or they do take a phone call for a response, they get to claim 2 hours of overtime already. If they qualify for overtime and already reached the 40 hours for that week. They must stay within the 30-minute legal drive of city limits, and this reduces fatigue as our employees kind of rotate. They take weekly shifts being on call. The annual cost estimate is approximately $15,796. This is based on a 256 on-call hour a week, and that's for 2 people. Individually, it'd be 128 hours per employee, which would be about 13,312 hours a year of on-call. It'd be 18.66% payroll tax and CAPERS contributions. This covers only the standby pay only, and it's funded through existing departmental budgets. Legal, it is approved to form. Our recommendation is to approve the adoption of the new standby and on-call policy as presented, and authorize the modifications of the City of Goddard personnel policy to reflect the changes. Any questions?
Yeah, so this is for hourly employees, right, not salary?
Yes, yes. All of our public works and wastewater employees are hourly.
Mayor, could I make a couple comments?
Of course.
Sarah, great job. First, I want to apologize to the council. I had forgot that this was on for the agenda today. I even asked Sarah before. I was like, is that presentation in there? So my apologies for not calling you ahead. I think it's the first time in 18 months that I haven't reviewed an agenda item with you before it's come onto the agenda. So my apologies for that. So the context is this started to come up when we had our interim public works director, Kevin Baker, here. He's a 40-year public works professional in a few different municipalities, and he brought it to my attention that we're one of the only communities in the area that doesn't offer standby pay. So, what that means is you've got our employees who are kind of have a ball and chain, so to speak, to the facilities that they're responsible for. They can't leave, and they're not being they can't leave that 30-minute area, and they're not being compensated for that. All of the cities that we looked at, and we actually looked at Mulvaney and Andover too, which I didn't get on the list for Sarah. That's also my bad. But there was only one other city out of that list of 8 or 9 that didn't have standby pay. So the standby pay that she mentioned is $1 per hour, except for the actual hours worked. So sometimes the on-call employees have to come in to do checks. Actually, they always do over the weekends. Whether it's checking the wastewater treatment plant levels, or checking the chlorine building, checking the tower, etc. So they would be paid for those callback periods of time where they're actually working, but for all the other hours while they're on call, they would get $1 an hour. So this is important for employee retention. In this particular department, we have 3 vacancies, and so turnover can be a challenge, but we worked with our finance staff to make sure that we could fit the budgetary impact in for 2026 and beyond. And I just feel like it's important that we're offering this benefit to our colleagues who are kind of step in place during that. They're on call for a week at a time, so for that week when it's their turn. So
We'll accept your apology for that $200 donation.
duly noted. I pledged $200 to the Goddard Go 5310 grant.
All right.
Not that you're strong arming anybody, but.
Well, I was going to do more than that, but $200.
Look how much you raised already.
Just starting ball rolling. No, I know even, I think, last Thursday, we had someone heading out to the water treatment plant at 10 in the morning. So, I mean, there is that, the fact that we're checking these things daily. Should give our citizens, be able to rest at ease that, things are being monitored on a constant basis as it relates to the water and everything. And I think it's unreasonable to provide compensation for that. At one time I was on call in the situation, and whether you pay for it or not, it's part of your job, but I think to recognize the time and the commitment that you're giving, I think it's a wise thing to do. So.
Make a motion to approve the adoption of the new standby and on-call policy as presented and authorize the modification of the city of Goddard personnel policy to reflect the changes.
Naomi's made the motion, for a second.
I second.
Crystal seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. Thank you, Sarah. 12:13, time's a waste.
I would know, we scheduled this one to 1:30.
I know, but still time's a flying by. I've read Brooks for there's a lot to go over here. So.
We just have Mike to read the whole thing.
Yes.
We could be in and out of here.
Perfect. No.
Okay. Well, this is a big moment in time, isn't it? Our first budget workshop. So thank you all for being here today. Staff has done a lot of work. Everybody here has worked really hard in giving input, adjusting numbers, changing numbers. There's still numbers that will be changed from what you see right here today. And it's ever evolving, but eventually we will get to the end and we will settle on something at the very end. So this is our first budget workshop. We're going to go over the general fund today, and then hopefully tomorrow night we can finish through library debt service as well. So kind of seeing how we go. If we have to schedule more meetings, we can maybe for next week if we don't get through those 3 funds.
Can I make one quick comment?
Sure.
I just want you to know how much I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. This is a gigantic leap forward in the way we're handling our finances, having projections into the future, looking ahead past just the next 12 months. It's taken a lot of time and effort. The narrative here is well written, and it's not only good for those 5 of us on the council, but it also provides information to the community. And they can see that, I mean, this is a gigantic upgrade in terms of financial transparency and what we're doing. And I just am so appreciative of that and the effort. And I hope the community appreciates this half as much as I do, because this is just awesome. I want to say that and turn you loose. So thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so we'll start with the overview. So you do have these books today, and if you can keep these with you, each time we meet, I will hand another section to you based on the fund that we're going to have. So in the beginning, you will see that you have your updated budget calendar, which this obviously changes quite rapidly, but it's the latest version we have. Secondly, I am always referring back to the CIP just to double check that we're trying to cover the things that we just adopted. So that's there for you to have handy. And then after the blue page is our general fund. So we'll start going through the narrative of the workbook. There will be times as we're working today through my slides. I will reference pages in the workbook. That way, it's hard. You can't get all of this stuff in the workbook on the slides. So it's easy to reference that After that, you have the yellow tab, or the yellow paper, and that's where we start our other funds that hopefully we will get to tomorrow evening, the library and the debt service fund. I wanted to keep those three funds together because there are no levy funds, and it'd be good to get those out of the way. So, at any time, if you guys have any questions, I mean, this is, feel free to do that. So today we'll start going over just the overview. I've already kind of done that part. We will talk about our property tax and mill levy discussion. We will look at the general fund tax revenue projections, kind of what we're looking into the future. Personnel budget summary. I felt like that was really important to bring first and foremost, since it is our largest cost center across the whole city. So I don't want you to get confused when we're talking about the personnel budget summary. That is for all funds and all departments, but it's very important since it's one of our largest cost drivers. Then we will go into the departmental budget summaries. This will be our most lengthy piece of our discussion today. We have 14 different departments in the general fund, so we will have to talk about each one of those, kind of the thoughts that went behind the costs and the expenses that went into those. Then we have a cost reduction and deferred items section, which we wanted to show you all the things that we pulled out of the budget or we decided not to do, just to try to be conservative with our spending. I mean, we're spending a lot of money, but we tried to scale things down, and we will talk about those items. I also provided you a fund balance forecast, which will show a forecast into 2029, trying to keep our general fund balance at a 25% reserve. You will see in 2026 that we are dipping below that just a tad, but I have some narrative behind that and why I feel it's possibly okay. And then conclusions, and then we'll talk next fund discussion and important dates. Any questions on what we're going over today?
Charge on.
Okay. Well, let's dive into our property tax and mill levy discussion. So, most of you should know this, but if you don't, and I was anticipating a room full of people that may not know this stuff, so they're here. The mill levy is the tax rate used to calculate local property taxes. It represents the amount of tax for $1,000 of assessed property value. Our mill levy supports lots of different things in our city. It funds our police, the administration of the city, some public works projects, and park operations. Our mill levy sets a stable, predicting funding mechanism, kind of unlike sales tax or franchise tax, some of our other tax revenue. Sometimes that can be just a little up or down, but you know, when we set our mill levy, we have a pretty clear case of what we're going to earn that year. Our general fund and mill levy supports our street repairs, capital projects, and debt service. So you will see later on that we will talk about how that mill is divided up between general fund, library, and debt service, and the components that go with those, and I guess funds the city's library as well. We were lucky this year. We were still growing. In the past couple of years, we have seen 15% growth year over year to our annual valuation. When I initially started this, I had done 12% for my calculation, and it came in at 13.17%. So our valuation went up just about where we expected it to be. So I consider this a strong assessed valuation growth. We're up 129% from 2022 if we project out to 2029. That's how much our valuation has gone up. Growing from 51.2 million up to 117.3 by 2029. Conservative growth forecasting. When I did the forecasting going into the future, I kind of decided to be a little more conservative since I'm starting to see just a little bit of drop off. We don't want to anticipate 15% going, you know, forever. So I kind of started scaling that back down from 11% in 2027 down to 10 and 10 and 10. If that changes, having trouble. Okay. The mill levy strategy, we first instituted our large mill levy this year or last year when we were doing our budget, which you all remember. We increased it 6 mills to launch our 5 and 5 program, and that is underway and being documented and monitored to make sure that those tax dollars are going to that purpose. We had also planned kind of, overall that we would anticipate an additional 2 mills this year to continue the 5 and 5 program, and then a possible 2 more mills in the 2028. So in the projections that you see here and the valuation changes in the dollars that are coming in, we've factored in, the increase of 13.17% that we're seeing, and we also factored in the 2 mills that we're hoping to get, and then going into the future, you'll see 10% increase, 2 mills, and then the 2 mills drop off. Or stay, we don't anticipate increasing as of today, so. Let's see here. I guess I do want to tell you, if you want to know the dollar amount, and this is on page 3 of your workbook, our valuation dollars for 2026 are estimated at $87,355,479. So again, that was a 13.17% increase. Breaking down the mill, the general fund doesn't get all of those mills that we have. We have to break it up into pieces and divvy it amongst the debt service fund and the library fund. So you can see here in 2025, right now, the general fund gets 31.89 mills, 2.3 go to the debt service, and 3 go to the library. So we don't get all of that. Those other funds and us also reap the benefits of that out of valuation, but they're not, that's how the mills are broken up.
For the answer to Cliff Note. So if you're wondering why are we using property tax dollars to support debt service, it's because we've got a couple of bonds that were issued before any of our time. The primary one being the U.S. Olympic Park bond. So as a part of the incentive proposal to get the Star Bond District here, we borrowed some funds to put in some of that public infrastructure, and we're using essentially property tax revenue or payment in lieu of taxes to help service that debt. So I would say primarily it's going towards that. There may be some other debt too that it services.
Yes, and we will see that very clearly.
When that debt matures, it's probably going to be a while, because that's only 7 years old, and most of those notes are 15 to 20 years.
We do have, and we will be going over the debt service fund very soon. Olympic Park debt expires in 2042, so this is in the back part of your book related to the debt service section.
And it could be refinanced at some point if we get a strong interest rate environment, or sales tax comes back online out there. If you want to retire a little debt, you can always play with that.
A good portion of that 2.377 mills is going to also pay, we do have a street bond. So that's a good portion of what we're doing as well. So we'll get into debt service later, but the different projects related to are allocated specifically. But for this one, we're paying for street improvements, and we're paying a little bit of the Olympic Park debt, and then we're also paying city a large portion of special assessments that we have in financing as well. So, okay, good. Okay. All right. So now we have this wonderful topic, revenue neutral rate. So, pop quiz. Anybody know what that means? Anybody want to explain that to me? Because I have to read it about 16 times before I totally understand it. The revenue neutral rate. So basically what this is something that I'm not exactly certain what year this happened, but it was several years ago. But each year we have to determine whether or not we're going to exceed the revenue neutral rate. And so in 2025, we had 37, our mill rate was 37.267. And since our valuation went up to 13.17%, the county says to generate the same amount of dollars, you only need 32.929 mills. So if we want to establish our foot in the ground at that 37 mills and then add 2 more, we have to let the county know that we want to exceed that. Our intention is to exceed that. So The city has prepared to present the resolution of intent to exceed the R&R at the July 7th meeting. That basically just says, county lawmakers, everybody in the whole wide world, this is what we are going to do. We plan to keep our 37.267 mills, and we probably plan to add to that. So that will then go out to all the taxpayers in our district, in our city, and they'll get to hear about that, and that's when you guys will probably start getting a lot of phone calls. So does that make sense to you? Did I explain that okay? Unfortunately, it's a really simple concept, but the proceedings to do such a thing and stay in line is like walking a tightrope. So staff and Craig and I, we've been really making sure we're following all the rules to make sure that we're doing exactly what we have to do there. So what does it look like in dollars? I mean, I've talked about the increase in valuation, the increase in all the different funds. So you can see in 2025, we're going to bring in around 77 million altogether, and then that's not bringing that all together. That's our assessed valuation, and that's how it's allocated based on the mills that we project. So in 2026, we expect our valuation to be at 87 million. We expect to bring in about 2.9 million to general fund, 207 to debt service, and 262 will go to the library based on those mills. That, like I said though, that does include that 2 mill increase, and the projections going out also include the increase in valuation and then the 2 mills added year after year. Okay? That's just a chart. Throw a chart in every once in a while so you guys can look at something different, right? So it just kind of shows where our valuation's been over time. I think we're very fortunate to have that growth and a lot of things on the horizon there. So
Just one quick question, Micah. Can you estimate of that 10 million ballpark of the increase? I mean, they said that property tax in the county went up on average 9%. So if you took the 77 million by 9%, that'd be about 6.3 million. So that would leave another $4 million in actual valuation growth in terms of new development. So you think that's close, the 4 million in the development and all the fees you've been collecting and properties that have been built?
I haven't looked. I'm sure Brooke's accurate. So I mean,
No, I'm
I
just
haven't
saying-
looked at it in total. Like,
Yeah, but I'm saying,
I can give you an exact number.
that's fine. I'm just curious because if the average rate of increase in our community was 7% below the average of the county, that would, there's some fluctuation there in between the actual fiscal growth of our community and the inflationary growth
Oh
of
yes.
valuation.
Oh sure.
See what I mean?
I would say, actually, I think Brooke and I talked about it a little bit. The percentage of increase in general valuation of property versus the increase that we're seeing by actual introduction of new residential units and commercial units. I think you and I can put a little bit maybe in one range. And I thought the preponderance of it was new development. Did you have something to say about that?
I have something to say about that. I'm very in tune with tax policy in the state legislature, and one of the fatal flaws of revenue neutral rate tax policy is that to bifurcate the amount of new revenue from increase in appraised value on existing properties from increase in appraised value from new construction is very, very difficult and time consuming. A municipality like Wichita that's got 10 budget analysts for every department could probably go in there and look at every single new property and the new assessed valuation that it's created, and then also go in and work with the appraiser's office on figuring out the increase of appraised value on existing properties and tell you the difference between the two. But for us to do it, it would be a lengthy
I was just
exercise.
curious, because part of that the reason for the revenue neutral rate is to adjust taxes because of the inflation. And I just think it's important that people understand that because we are growing, it's not just the inflation that is increasing our revenue. It's not, the actual growth of the city is probably more of a factor.
I think it's definitely
And
a
that-
preponderance of the factor is gonna
Right,
be
and
the
that's-
increased development over the individual property taxes per property. And as Craig is saying, yeah, that's a complicated algorithm, which technically we could do through our ArcGIS services. It would just, we'd have to draw that out, and so, but just generally reviewing, because we get data from the county, raw data from the county every quarter. And we can extract, we can parse that data out to say, individual properties are growing at X number of rate on average, and then, but the collective whole, the sum of the whole is greater based on the new development that we're introducing. I think that, yes, the new development we're introducing is gonna exceed the individual property's valuation, appreciation.
The unfortunate part about the legislation is that even if we went through that entire exercise and we could figure out the two amounts, one that's attributed to increases from new construction versus appraised value on existing properties, it'd be impossible, because the way properties are appraised, to make it so we can take in only the new revenue from new construction, and then everyone else who had increased appraisals gets a savings. The best we could do, and I'm not suggesting this for our community because we're so far behind on infrastructure and have $110 million in capital improvements that are necessary, but would be to split the difference between the revenue neutral and the current year mill levy. That's the best you could do if what you're trying to do is only take in new revenue from new construction and not have those with existing properties have their taxes increase. But because of the way the legislation is written and the way that it doesn't really speak well with the process of appraising properties, it just can't be done
No, I
to
just
an
think-
exact science.
But that is a general point. Part of the reason that we're trying this revenue neutral rate process is to try to mitigate inflation as it relates to people's property taxes going up and trying to put some pressure on us as city government, not to just take that as a windfall. In our situation where we've been so far behind on so many things, we're fortunate to be able to have that revenue and put it to work like we're doing. And the growth in these numbers is because of those facts. And I just think that whole ties together with the whole thing of revenue neutral rate. But we're and we're still in the ring around Wichita. Our tax rates, as far as property tax, we're lower than everybody that Iowa and Wichita, big element. So our 1 cent sales tax has helped keep our property tax low. We're not positioned financially with all the things that we need to just say, hey, this is great. We'll just go the revenue neutral rate and run the same budget we ran last year. We're not. There's too much going on and too much to get done and too much to catch up. So
If I could make one more comment, Mayor, even if we did go revenue neutral, that does not equate to a property tax reduction or even zero sum for property owners. It's unless their appraised value is flat, which no one's is. So just important to note that even if we were revenue neutral, it would not equate to lower property taxes for the individual property owner unless the appraised valuation of their home decreased or did not increase.
all right, that's
Chief saving us all kinds of money. He went from Tahoes to Priuses.
that's deep enough to go down that hole. I apologize.
It's an important discussion.
Okay, so this goes right into our property tax impact. So based on the mill levy that we set, what would a customer or a citizen with a $300,000 home expect in the increase in mills? So to help the residents and decision makers understand the impact of the mill levy change, the table below estimates the annual city of Goddard property tax on residential appraised at $300,000. So we all know that the Kansas law assesses residential properties at 11.5 of their appraised value. So we would take that 34,500 times 0.0, whatever the mill rate is. So you can see in 2025, when we increased the mills six mills, they had an additional $205,000 of change to their annual property taxes. So if we increase it again by 2 mills and 2 mills, you can see an additional $69, each year for a cumulative total of $278 per year. So that's the dollar effect based on those 2 mills overall.
This also, again, sorry to beat a dead horse, assumes that the appraised value of their home does not change, which it will.
Right. All right, so any other questions with that? We'll move on. So the general fund has other tax revenues as well. We have, other than ad valorem, we have these other taxes. Ooh, that showed up on that slide. Okay, so we have ad valorem taxes, or personal property taxes, franchise taxes, sales tax, comp use, and alcohol tax. That is not how it looked on my slide. We will talk about each one of these taxes as well, because I mean, these are obviously very important and very large tax revenue streams for us. So on the next page, and this page here corresponds with page 6 in your workbook, so you can look at it a little bit closer. But you can see a scenario from 2022 through a projected 2029 of what we expect to bring in all of these different types of taxes. Let's see here. You can see year over year, everything is growing. It's substantially in 2025 when we installed that 6 mills, and then our valuations were at 15%. But then we start kind of dropping off as the mills that we increase are less, and our valuations aren't growing as much as they were in the past. Something that's handy is, I want to move on to franchise tax revenue. So it averages about 5.52% of an annual increase year over year. Our sales tax collection have been averaging about 4.5% of increase annually. Comp use tax is about 9.37%. Alcohol tax revenue is really kind of flat. You just kind of never know what you're going to get from that, and that's given to us from the county. So those projections have all been in here back into this slide to show you in 2023 it was at 7.78% all the way through. So this is a good source of revenue, obviously, for our general fund. This is the majority of the revenue coming in to support all the expenses.
For just a quick definition for those that don't know what the franchise revenue is, so we collect 5% of the gross sales from utility providers such as Evergy and Kansas Gas. And that's in lieu of allowing them to utilize our right-of-way to serve their customers.
Also, in the future years, in 2028, 2029, I would expect sales tax and comp use tax to go up more. I was conservative here, just on historical uses, but with growth in the city, more consumers, that I have a feeling that would probably even get better. We don't even have anything factored in here for Star Bond District being paid for and being completely available, which will change things tremendously when we get to that point. Okay. Any questions on tax revenue? We'll move on to our largest cost for our city. So again, I wanted to talk about the personnel budget summary. It's our largest cost driver. It affects all funds and all departments. And also this year, I did a major reallocation of salary. So you're going to see, and which within the narratives in the book, you will see a lot of times where I say that multiple times. I have redone the allocation of salaries for all funds and departments to get the people that are doing what they're doing in the right department. So if you see a tremendous uprise in one of the funds, you'll be like, why is that? Well, I probably pulled people out of water that didn't work in the water department back to the administration. I moved people that I know, for instance, you'll see in the court department, that salary would have been all allocated to water or something. So pulled them out, put them back into court. So I think it's just over time, if they just got set up and we're just cleaning them up this way and doing that. It does make some of the numbers look a little bad along the way as we're trying to do that. So the personnel expenditure summary, what I did here was I created columns for each of these years here, an actual and a budgeted for 2023, 24, and through 2026. And you might ask, why do we care about that? We have to fully budget for an employee. So we have to pretend like they're going to be here every day. They're going to have the best benefits, the most expensive benefits. We have to pretend like we're there. So when we budget for that, I like to see what we actually spent out of that budget. So we're averaging, in the 90s, upper 95%, 90% of the actual budgeted total. So if we thought, well, we budget high, but we don't use it all, we're almost using it all in these instances. So you may see here the percent of budget achieved, yes, and year-over-year change. So you can see from 2023 to 2024, our salaries went up our salary and benefits went up 7.3%. And then in 2025, you saw 22.45%, and that might have triggered something. You might have thought, why? Why is that so high? We'll talk about that in a second. And then in 2026, we're up another 6.69%. So back here in 2025, those increases were based on an 8% annual increase to wages. We were at a time where that was kind of a norm along the way of kind of increasing higher because inflation was higher. We were trying to keep up with, all the COVID costs and the cost of living. In 2026, we have brought that back down to a 5% level. When we do our annual raises, not everybody gets the full amount, but that's what we budget for, and based on merit and so on and so forth. In 2025, 20% was also factored in the increase in health insurance. So that was a major driver there. And so that's when we decided, or Craig decided to, and Sarah decided to, team up with health insurance and try to redo that and make it more beneficial. And that's when Freedom Claims came in and we were able to reduce. So in 2026, we've only budgeted for a 10% increase because we can possibly utilize the money that we've set aside at Freedom Claims to offset any potential costs. So that's kind of the reason of those change and why that was so high. Also, in 2026 and every year, we have budgeted for a fully staffed staff. And you can see through our narratives where the staffing has occurred and where we've increased those things, but we've included that as well. Fully staffed, expecting that. So, just based on historical averages here, I just went ahead and projected that we would spend 95.2% of our total budget in salaries. That gives us just a little bit of leeway to juggle with. Staffing levels, this is what we're looking at. So we're increasing in 2026. In PD, we plan to have at least 18 full-time employees. Administration will have 11, and Public Works will have 13. So that's fully staffed. We never are fully staffed. So that's one of the things that we're always trying to be fully staffed, but that's what we're aiming for. Part-time employees, you might kind of wonder what that's about. A good portion of that is pool employees and any sort of seasonal Public Works. And I believe we have one part-time person in the police department as well. And governing body members, you're considered our employees, at least you're on payroll, so you get to be included on here as well. You guys have any questions? Okay, so some of the key factors impacting the 2026 personnel budget. Again, I want to reiterate, I've reallocated things. So when we start looking at the general fund overall and salaries, you'll be able to see that a good portion of it was reallocated back to the general fund. The scenarios also, like I said, include a 5% salary adjustment. Health insurance had been budgeted for 10%. I'm just gonna restate a lot of this stuff I've already said. I also plan for the Christmas bonuses that we give employees each year. I think that's something that might have been overlooked in the past. I mean, I'm sure it was just kind of thought we would do it, and we do it, but now it's on the line item for that. We have several employees that we anticipate for retirements next year that have large payouts for vacation and holiday, or vacation and sick accruals. So those are big things that we need to pay for. So we need to make sure we put that in there. The positions that we hire for PD are a little more expensive than the positions of a normal employee because their Kansas Police and Fire retirement contributions are higher than a normal Capers employee. So that's impacting that line item at 24.7% rate versus, I don't know, 9.71, I believe. Okay, I thought it was 10.71, but 9.71. Okay. So, however, we do have some savings from our workman's compensation premiums that we switched to Cayman. So, we have some savings there that kind of factored into that. And unemployment insurance increased to reflect a larger employee base. So you can see those things in there.
On that 5% salary adjustment, so 2.5% of that is based on cost of living adjustment, which that's lower than the Midwestern CPI last time I looked at it. And then the other 2.5% is based on merit through the performance evaluation process, which, by the way, we are revamping through our contract with McGrath Consulting. This is the time to ask questions and comment. There's been questions in the past about, when did we authorize this, that, or the third, and the answer is always, well, it was last summer and fall during budget season. And so I just want to underscore that this is the time to talk about this stuff, which is why we try to get it out to you early, and that way we're ready to chat about it when we get to workshop. So.
Yeah.
But if it's all perfect, you can just say that too. So. Brooke does a great job.
I'll go fill out the certification page and get it done. So, send it off. Any questions? Any comments? Alright, so now we'll start going into the general fund departmental budget summary. So like I mentioned earlier, the general fund's made up of 14 different departments, and some of these are going to be kind of confusing because we actually have funds as well. So going through all of these, and in your workbook on page 10, it'll give a description of what goes into each one of these different departments. If and when we get our new software, we will probably be doing a revamp of a lot of this stuff. Either creating new funds for some of these departments altogether or cleaning things up. But something I'd like for you to notice is we have a Parks and Recreation department. We also have a special Parks and Recreation fund. So I don't want you getting confused when we're talking about those two things. And when we go through the expenses going through Parks and Rec, you'll see the Parks and Rec here in the general fund is more of an operations and maintenance type fund that takes care of the mowing and landscaping and that kind of thing for our parks. We do spend small dollars for small capital projects in this department. In the special Parks and Rec fund that you'll see later is more for large capital projects that we do and money that we set aside to do large parks like maybe North Park. Library, we have a department here for library. I actually wrote that in there, the building maintenance. So this is, since the building is the city's, the library's building is the city's, we take care of all the maintenance on that building. So, any sort of maintenance, repairs, that's what goes into that fund there. So you'll know the library has their mill levy fund, and then they have this fund as well.
I was just going to say the source of revenue for that building maintenance does not come out of the mill levy that goes to the library, so it's supported by
general fund
mill levy.
Yes. So that can be real confusing. I mean, having those two different pieces. Okay, so we can go on, and I went ahead and put transfers in here because it's not necessarily department, but it's something that kind of has its own grouping as well. It's really confusing too, by the way. So, okay, so this is on page 13 in your workbook. So if you can't see that there, it's easier to see that. This is our general fund revenue and expense summary with our proposed 2026 budget figures. So I showed you the 2023 revenue, or the revenues and expenses for all of these different cost centers, departments, however you want to call it, the money that came in, the money that went out, and how it flowed over time. You can see here our administration. It has, it's one of our largest next to the police department. So those are our two largest ones. We have some departments that don't bring any money in, so they're just basically using up general fund cash on hand for those things. But those are departments that we deem important. So you can see in 2026. We expect our total revenues to be about $7,053,000, our expenses to be $7.4 million. I want to back up too and show you in 2024, our 2025, our total revenues are 6.1, but we're going to spend 7.1. So I remember when I sat with the mayor, he's like, "You better be prepared to explain that, lady." I think that's what he said.
I apologize if I talk like
Just
that.
kidding.
Shame on me.
So how can we get away with going in the hole by those dollars amounts? Approximately $1,033,000 in 2025 and another $435 in 2026. We've built up a very healthy fund balance in the general fund that's just kind of sitting there, and it's been growing. So when we go negative, we're eating up cash reserves. One of the things is we're trying to juggle all these different expenses in each one of these different departments. At the end of the day, you'll see it later, we'll look at the fund balance, roll forward, and we'll be able to determine, is this okay to do? Do we feel comfortable spending this much money? If we're happy with the metrics that it shows, then we will. If we're not, we'll need to make cuts to bring that back closer to zero.
Are you gonna go through transfers? I'm sorry if I can't. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's part of the discussion of the 25%, on an ongoing basis, keeping it 25%.
Yeah. Or higher.
Or higher.
Yeah.
So basically, because we have been higher,
Yeah.
spending this money brought us down to where we're just dipped below.
Right.
In the,
Yeah. And I'm going to go into what's
Sure.
driving those different amounts, why we've eaten up so much money in those years. Significantly, it comes out of the administration fund, where we have done capital projects in our discretionary capital outlay line item. So when you see my quarterly report or my monthly report that shows the breakdown of what's going in that capital discretionary outlay line item in the general fund, that's what I want to keep you guys aware of. This is what, we're spending money on these things, and that's what's doing that. A good portion of that are consulting fees for North Park and master plans and downtown streetscape designs and all of that stuff that we've done to really get our capital improvement plan running and in place. So we spend a lot of money on that stuff, and that's why. But we'll go into more detail on that when we get into that department. Is it clear as mud?
Black and white and red all over there.
All right, so we'll start just going through each one of our departments now. The first one is administration. Again, this is one of our largest ones. This is where all our tax revenues come into this department, and the administration of the city kind of flows out of this department. So you can see our total revenue expected is $6.6 million. That's an overall revenue increase of about 15.65%. So that's a good thing. It's good to see that revenue coming in. Other items, we have other revenue items other than tax revenues coming in that line. We've got license revenues, firework fees and revenues. We have the project administration fees, and that's one, if you recall, is the one where when our temporary note projects go to permanent financing, we get 5% of the total engineering and construction cost of those projects back to us as a fee for administrating them. I think I budgeted conservatively. I budgeted $150,000 for this year and next year. I think we're going to exceed that based kind of on what Mike and I talked about, but we just want to make sure we don't get overzealous in booking that kind of money. Interest income, the general fund, this is the general fund portion only. So I need to get to my paper. So as we're starting to look through, like I said, starting on workbook page 17, this is the detail behind this. So as I've said in the past, the interest income now is allocated based on fund balance in every single fund monthly. So you might have seen a large drop. You saw a large increase in interest income last year, but this year it's scaled back based on it being allocated across the whole city. So I think the mayor had a question about the interest, and I just wanted to make sure that you all know that that's only the general funds portion. Okay. So if we start talking about expenditures, in 2026, the total budget expenditures right now are sitting at $1.4 million, and that's an overall expenditure decrease of 11.39%. So that looks good, even though we're still in the hole, like we saw on that first page that you might want to keep handy. I don't know what page that was on, the summary page. You might want to bookmark that one. Yeah, page 13. That's the one that we're kind of keep looking at. A good portion of this changes were the major personnel reallocation. So if we start looking down through the workbook pages, you're going to see all of the different details. So one of the things I thought would be really handy is for you all to see all the line items that go into this fund. I mean, you may wonder, why are we spending? Well, it's all here. This is every single line item in our accounting system is in here. And if I could make you a note, I did that. Of how things change. So, you know, salaries, it's increased substantially, almost $300,000 just in salaries line alone. But again, that's a major reallocation back to where it needs to go. All utilities across, you'll hear me say this a million times, utilities, any type of phone, all that kind of stuff, I gave it a 5% increase just for inflationary costs. Also, in all these line items, I've talked to department heads and I've talked to everybody, and we've looked at those lines for the past 2 years to make sure that what's in there, we want to be spending money on these items. You'll notice in other professional services at the bottom of page 19, we are cutting out the lobbying, I believe, so that's a $26,000 savings right there.
Rick, I want to take a quick victory lap on that subject, if you don't mind. So we had a deadline coming up of July 1, 2025 to work with the state treasurer's office to certify the amount that we'll receive from the budget proviso that we worked on with our lobbying firm. Thank you guys for your support in hiring them, and also for financing the trip of the mayor, vice mayor, Ryan, and I to go up to Topeka last year and meet with our legislators to talk about this issue. But it's about $2.5 million as far as the return on that $26,000 investment. So that is going to accelerate the payoff of the STAR bond by a couple of years, which is a big deal. So thank you guys for that opportunity, for allowing us to bring them on. The city of Goddard's never really had a lobbyist before, so it's kind of a new way of thinking. So, and I believe we will go try to do another budget proviso next year, but now that we know how it works, we don't think we need a lobbyist to accomplish it. So.
All right, moving on down through the pages of the general fund here. Insurance and bonds, that includes the revised rates, also includes our cybersecurity policy that we put in place. Also, something that's really hard to understand is at least in my accounting system, is all the softwares that we have through departments and how it's allocated. So we did a very extensive, what I feel is every department head reviewed the software that we're using and paying big dollars for, and we decided whether we need it, we don't need it, and so on and so forth. So we've identified some things that we will be cutting, and you'll see, and that we've identified things when contracts expire, even into the future, we're Xing them out, because I just don't think that they're worth doing. So we are actively trying to find ways to cut money and pull things out, because we know that there's other things more important that we're trying to get at the end of the day. So up here, you will see the discretionary capital outlay. This here is, like I said, our major line item that really shifts that negative fund, or the negative net income into the red. In 2025, we had to fund a good portion of our 5 and 5 street program because we decided to spend more than we expected to have actual cost savings. So, you know, when we brought you guys the 5 and 5 agenda item not very long ago, you know, we had the $1 million, we have $250,000 that we do for annual street maintenance, and then so we tried to roll those in together, but we got just a little bit more for our money, so we had to utilize some of that discretionary capital outlay line item to utilize that. The $335,000 for the North Park Architectural Services, this was on the last budget, or last agenda item, and one of the things that Craig and I have talked about since that has last happened was we have decided, well, in that agenda packet, we decided that we'll reimburse this fund from tent note proceeds, so we won't have that cash draw, but it's still in here. However, I am looking right now at the streets fund, and it's in dire needs of more money. So it may be that when we start talking about streets, instead of using that 335 there, we may use it to help fund more street program into the future. Long story short, as I've done the street fund, it's been going in the hole every year, and we're at a critical stage of just maintaining what we've promised. So we're trying to strategically figure out how to make sure we can do the street maintenance. We have enough for the $1 million. It's the annual, or the 250 that we typically do. So we may utilize some of those dollars in a cash instance instead of putting them there. Did I explain that all right?
You did, and I'll explain it another way, because sometimes you hear things a different way, and it's helpful. When we get the temp note issued, or the temporary financing for the North Park, it'll be somewhere around $4.5, $5 million. You know, if that's the budget you guys want to go with, we will reimburse the discretionary capital outlay line item in that $335,000 amount, and instead we'll use that $335,000 out of discretionary capital outlay to make up the shortfall in streets, so we can do $1 million for reconstruction and $250,000 for maintenance or resurfacing. So basically, that to get right into the engineering and design of the North Park, we can use that cash we have, and then we'll pay that cash back when we borrow the money for the North Park. That way that money is there to go towards streets next year.
Yeah. And that instance will happen through the transfer. So later on in this presentation, you will see the transfers to the streets at 1.7 million. It would be closer to 2 million probably at the end of the day. Not 3 million, 2 million, sorry. Big difference. $250,000. We have a bunch of other projects that come in, the signage, some easements, other consultants, Means Park, drainage issue, linear park. So basically, anything that comes to council that we didn't plan for, or all of a sudden we want to do, I always say, well, we have money there, so that's where it goes, and we can keep track of it there. Well, or I say, we don't have money there, we can keep track of it there. So that's what that line item is. In 2026, these are the items that we would plan to take out of there if it was approved by you all. Accounting software, we've scaled that project down from $250,000. I think we've kind of we overestimated just a bit or I overestimated just a bit, just to kind of have some buffer, but I contacted the rep and got a closer cost for that project. And that is in our CIP. So I try to identify the items for you all that's in our CIP in the next year's budget. The comp plan, Craig sincerely cut that in half. I mean, he's gonna try to, it was 100, and Ryan's like, what?
It's gonna depend on what level of comp plan you guys want. If you want the statutory minimum, we can do it for 50 grand. If you want the Cadillac of comp plans, it'll be 150. So, you know, we'll get all sorts of bids and stuff back, and you guys can decide what you want to do with that.
And just keeping in mind, if we go over, that's the line item it's gonna come out of, and it's gonna come out of our general fund. And in 2026, we're right on that line of our fund balance of 24.7% if everything is perfect. So, just letting you know. Factored in an additional $50,000 for other consultant fees and $100,000 for miscellaneous grant matches. You never know what's going to happen here. Every day there's something new coming in and telling me, hey, by the way, what about this? So I like having a little bit of buffer there so we have something to play with. So
we're applying for a $6 million grant for the pedestrian overpass for the third try, but this is a different program, and I think our match would be $65,000 for a $6 million project. So that would come out of there. And then the other consultant fees, you know, sometimes we run into issues, bureaucratic issues, and I call them fix-it people, consultants that'll go in and work with the different agencies and attorneys and stuff and make life easier for us, so we're not chasing things down 20 different rabbit holes, but they cost money, so they would come out of that area.
Just gonna say Brant could do the fundraiser for the 65,000. Pull off the 20 for the van. You can do the 65 for the overpass. That way you can get back and forth from where you live to town. Just say,
How
okay.
long is that gonna be?
I don't know, not very long. We'll see if we get the grant or not. Gotta get the grant first.
If we get that one, you guys are gonna hear the celebration, you know, from the comms.
we'll find the 65 on that one. Yeah, we'll find it.
Right there.
So anyway, that's, yes, right there.
350, 335. 65 is right there.
So
Go through
anyway,
those pennies, Brant,
that-
find those $1.50 pennies.
all right, so I think this is a good point in time for some discussion. A good majority of projects come out of this part. Some of the other departments will go fairly quick. Do you guys want to discuss this one? Anything you don't like, you don't want to do? Should we push something off? I mean, you don't have to make a decision today, but maybe some feedback and something, just anything to discuss, like, hate, let me know.
I think that the discipline that we're undergoing and the pressure we put on the budget to do the street projects is self-imposed discipline, but to take care of things that should have been done a long time ago. So with the growth that we have, if we can endure this year, the next 2 years, as we continue to grow, that pressure decreases because of the growth we're experiencing. So I just appreciate the fact that it hasn't been easy to get to the million, but I think in the long run we'll look back and go, we were wise about how we handled our finances. I think that in the past it's going to require us going forward maybe not to be so ambitious about things that kind of pop up. We've done some really good things, I think, with the park, the lighting, I think was really great. It's nice to see the street cuts, the playground equipment that we've added. Kids are using it every day. The money we spent on Linear Park to fix the drainage. Yeah, thank you, Tina, for her work on that. But we just, I think, we're going to have to be a little more picky about the things that we choose to add onto, and if we have one new council person, we'll maybe give that person a little Grace to maybe if they want to do something, they have an idea coming on this, I think we need to listen to that, but, I just think we've got to be disciplined too, and, that way Brooke doesn't have to sit in the back and we have to do the thumbs up. So I think when we start spending money going forward, we're gonna see more thumbs down, so that, she's got this little eyebrow thing that she does when it's like,
I know,
no,
look
you
at
don't
the
have
wrinkle
the,
right there.
yeah, you don't have the money for that, it's that, so, but I think we need to be disciplined too. And I think there's a lot of good things that we can do, but we're kind of in this transition going from, walking to running to flying, and we just kind of taking off here. So we just need to be cautious, and like you said, I've always, over the years, talked about opium, other people's money. And it's easy to spend other people's money. But this is our community, having these budgets, doing this planning, understanding the needs that we have, all the stuff that we've done. Now we have, I think, really good, clear direction on where to spend money. So we're just not rolling in here in 6 months from now, hey, let's do this, or oh, let's do that. No, the planning is important, and the next thing is the discipline it takes to stick to the plan. And there's some other things that I think, once we're done with this budget process, I think we need to really get serious about talking about running a campaign to increase the sales tax. We're to get you out of the building. And if the community wants a library, the senior center, we can do it. But we just need to be disciplined with the other things and right now where we are and do what we can with what we have, and not decide to go off into right field and do something else. But that's fine.
I think the policies that we put in place with the 25% on the funds that require it
Right.
is important, and I'm really watching that, and even doing worst case scenario, and I don't like dropping it below. I mean,
But that's self-imposed discipline,
And
and I think that's important that we realize that going forward. That
Right.
we need to honor that and do what we can to be sure we keep that reserve fund in place. But we're fortunate that in the last several years that money got kind of built up,
yeah.
but we've, I think, utilized it appropriately in terms of the streets and things that, the 1 cent sales tax was directed for in the beginning. So,
Yeah.
but I think that's a good point. We're at that 25%, we need to honor that.
And there's always lots of surprises. I mean, truly, a piece of equipment at the park really isn't a surprise, but you start talking public works or streets or this happened and this happened, that's the stuff that scares me. I mean, that's,
We've had the motors going out on the wells and different things.
but,
Water leaks around here. We keep fixing, hopefully we can
Yeah.
get fixing some of these pipes when there's been leaks.
any other questions, adjustments, changes? Moving on. Okay, so our next department is school department, governing body department. So, did you know you had one? Just curious. Maybe?
I'm really disappointed I haven't seen that corporate jet in there yet.
Yeah. When you start having a revenue stream for your piece, let me know.
Another fun.
Right now, you're just a taker, not a giver, so.
My golf winnings,
Yeah.
going from pennies to dollars, maybe it'll be better.
So the total budget expenditures in the governing body department for 2026 is budgeted for $73,660. This is an overall expenditure increase by 5.77%. One of the things that's a big driver in that is, and you all received your salary for being on the council, the payroll taxes weren't allocated here. And they were going somewhere else, in a different department, so we're gonna get them back into the department where they belong. Sarah and I are gonna clean all that up at year end. We're just gonna let it roll for the year, and then at year end, oh, you're not. When you come back from maternity leave, I'll have it all mixed up. It'll be exciting for us. Let's see here, legal services. One of the things that you'll see throughout this is our costs for legal services keep going up. We've been using, Morris Lang more and more and more for things that we need, so, you know, pieces of that get drawn to a mini department. So you'll see that cost going up. You all donate to, we have some community donations coming out here, the Goddard Educational Foundation and the Tanganyika Twilight event. So those two events are paid out of this fund.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, not really a donation, that's just our registration
Okay.
to be there. A community partnership with those groups.
All you gotta do is tell them to sharpen their pencils.
Tablets, technology for council members, we always have to budget in for that, for those items as well, and your council training and orientation. We had actually budgeted a little higher, we had budgeted a little bit higher in the governing body orientation and training. We did cut that back just a bit, from 15,000 down to 10 to find some money there. We think we can make that work. So
I know that seems like a lot, but it is a very, very wise investment. You know, you guys are members of the public 1 minute, and then you're sworn in and you're making $1 million decisions the next. And so to invest in your professional development, I think is really important, and I'm glad you guys are doing it and support it.
So any questions on the governing body department? Move on, City Hall. City Hall is another department in the general fund. Our total budgeted expenditures are $38,075. This is an overall expenditure increase of about 9.41%. The items that are particularly paid out of this department are our building maintenances, you know, anything that needs worked on, utilities, supplies. There is a discretionary capital outlay line for this one. In the past, we booked some office furniture and refig in the front right there. We don't anticipate anything in 2025 or 26. So I don't think we can get another desk in anywhere. I think we're maxed out in space unless we put it in the hallway. So that's really just pretty much operational per se.
Can't really use that shed as an office. Up there.
Okay. Moving on to court. This department has a little revenue stream. It's actually down a little bit. We'll discuss that. But in 2026, our total budgeted revenue is at $115,000. That's an increase of 68.57%. So why do I have it budgeted like that? Well, in the past couple years, we've seen fines and court revenue decline a little bit, particularly because our police wasn't fully staffed and our new people that were coming on were more in the training mode than out running the streets or working the streets.
It takes over a year for someone on board to be actually useful in light terms.
So that has been down a little bit. So that 115,000 is honestly an average of the past 4 years, to kind of show that hopefully we get back up to where we were. In 2026, when we have more staff come on in the PD as well, we also expect those revenues to come back up. Our total expenditures in the court department for 2026 are estimated to be $270,400. That's a 17.2% increase. This one was a major personnel reallocation and planned retirement in this fund. So you will see salaries and benefits jump drastically in this fund because they are moved out of the other funds that they didn't need to be in back into this one. And also retirement benefits have been also factored into this salary payout. Legal services also a major increase. Again, as I mentioned before, court has a lot of legal fees, so a good portion of those are allocated here, and we kind of budgeted for them to continuously go up because it's just something that work does. Any questions? So, next is our police and animal control. I have combined, police was on its own, animal control was on its own. I've combined it into one in 2026. We'll go ahead and just put those together, and they're not in two separate departments. So that's an easy change to do in the accounting system. So you will see in 2026 our total projected revenue is $21,750. Way to go, Lance. Way to go. That's awesome. A good portion of that is our opioid settlement revenue that we receive in, and honestly, we never know what we're going to get from that. That's just kind of a check sent in when it's collected. And then we do have some revenue for police services and revenue, report revenue, and that is typically just remaining flat. So honestly, the police department, they're not obviously a big revenue driver. We don't expect them to be, but however, the 2026 total budget expenditures are budgeted at $2,561,819. That is an increase of 9.78%, which, you know, overall that's really not too bad. The expenditures, just things to note, this is fully staffing. We're trying to get the police department fully staffed. That includes 15 full-time officers, 1 part-time, 2 full-time civilian, plus benefits. Also, in this, like I want to mention in the past, like I mentioned in the past, as we filling these positions, the full-time employees in the police department have the KP&F, you know, their retirement benefits are substantially higher than CAPER, so, you know, that adds to that major increase there. Also, to mention here, whenever you have staffing and full-time staff, or I mean, you know, your staffing, you've got lots of uniform costs and equipment. Those are things that are specially fit. You can't just reuse them. You can't throw them in the back room and reuse them again. I mean, policemen have to be fit properly for all of their equipment, their vests, anything from boots to handcuffs to whatever they need to have. Software, they do have a good portion of the software that's needed for running a police department. Those are a few of the software that's important to them. And she did look through all the software, like I mentioned, just to make sure that we're utilizing what we actually want to be using. We also have included a new TASER replacement program that Lance has looked at substantially and even reduced from initial quotes down to just, you know, what he could get by with. So it's a TASER replacement program kind of on rotation that would be efficient and something that's needed. Computer equipment, they have tough books. They can't just have the regular, you know, surface stuff out. They need something that's substantial and can go in and out of cars. So that equipment's expensive. So, you know, we factored in, I believe, 3 of those in 2026. We also have factored in 2 vehicle purchases. These vehicle purchases do not come out of the operating budget. You will see them coming out of transfers. So when you see the net bottom line, in just letting you know, when you see that in the lineup of expenses in your workbooks, let's see on page 31 through 35, that expenditure is actually going to show up in transfers later. But I do want to mention that, you know, initially when we were planning early on, we had started out at 3 vehicles. We backed it down to 2 for 2026. So that was a savings of about, I don't know, $85,000, I think, in that fund. Fuel costs, those are also substantial costs in the police department. And then just other equipment costs. We have lots of radar, camera equipment, a lot of things like that that's in there. So.
Brooke, with under 5 minutes to go, maybe we could set the table for tomorrow night's workshop and see if council has anything they'd like to have us come with tomorrow, or if they want to see something differently, or questions, comments that we can answer between meetings.
Sure. we can pick back up at police and animal control tomorrow. We meet tomorrow night at 6 o'clock here in the council room. And we'll finish up the general fund, and then if we have time, we should have time, we'll start proceeding through debt service and library. Anybody wants to bring up anything you'd like to see before tomorrow, or any questions?
I think this has been really good. I just want to make a quick comment. I had a chance to visit, I've asked a couple other mayors, how do you measure the size of the staff of the police, your staff, your police staff? One of the things that was mentioned to me, and this is important as we're growing as a community, that he said probably one officer for every 500 people in your community. So as we're growing from 6,000 to 7,000 to 8,000 to 9,000 to 10,000, is that kind of is there a standard, is that in your mind, is that close to a standard rule of thumb, or, because for me, it's trying to develop an understanding of, as we're growing as a community, what growth do we need to have to protect the community, and what's kind of the norm across, if there's a standard or whatever. So, is that, a fair question?
You can make that calculation. Something I think is important to think about is staffing in regards to how busy we are and the type of calls we're going on, and the number of officers you have working at one time. There are many times where there is just one officer working by themselves, and we are a large enough agency we can't count on the Citrus County Sheriff's Department to be there to always be a back, because they have their own obligations in a large county to handle. And we also have our expectations of how we want our officers handling calls, and to just punt those calls to some other agency may not rise to the same expectations of the quality control that goes into, or the management of how calls are handled. But having an officer working by themselves a lot of times puts us into a very unsafe situation. You had one officer working by himself a few years ago, a year and a half ago, maybe, about a year and a half ago. He was involved in a shooting, and he was by himself on a shift. And there's no other way I could think that you could safely and logistically and keeping officer safety in mind, officer wellness in mind, without increasing the staffing so that there's two on at all times. And technically this wouldn't do this even to that 2026 budget, but it would get it closer. And I can sit down with you even more and show the schedule and what there is for coverage, and then you have times where someone calls in, and there's multiple times where we'll just have an open shift that will have to be covered by a second shift hanging over and a third shift coming in earlier.
And we're obvious, that is, as a rule of thumb, maybe it's a little different if you're in Larned or you're Rose Hill, or out someplace where you walk into the restaurant and they know that you're not from town. That's what I'm saying, because the highway creates a whole transient situation too. That
just the amount of crashes, the amount of type of people that are coming through. So.
Well, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is that we may not be where you want to be today, but as we're growing, we can grow that in proportion along with everything else we're doing.
Yeah.
That number's half the budget. So obviously what you do is very important, and the community realizes that.
And that doesn't even get us to a pay higher than
No.
other officers
And so-
around.
So I think the point is, we just keep working with that and growing it as we can in relationship to the growth of the budget. So we are in a place where 4 or 5 years from now, hopefully have a new place by then, and be staffed at a different level, and then dealing with all the traffic and the highway, we'll have proper backup and stuff.
I'm gonna piggyback you real quick. I know we're on the edge of time, but we've done a ton of capital improvement planning in the last year and a half or two. We kind of closed the chapter on that, and now we're getting into organization improvement planning through our contract with McGrath. And a big part of that work is going to be looking out to the future and making sure that our staff is a proportionate size to the community. Not only that, but the services that our citizens expect. So.
You have any closing thoughts?
No, not at all. I can think of all kinds of cool police cars.
Ford GT.
Okay,
Segways, dude.
we'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, I like them all.
I'm gonna make a motion, we adjourn, since everybody has other places to be, except me. Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We adjourn, thank you all for your time.
We'll pick back up at